Local authorities poke holes in U.S. tests, raising concerns about the island's water. That's the story we are tracking in your Barbados Today evening news update for Friday, January the 26th. Thanks for joining us. I'm Emmanuel Joseph. Unjustified, that's how officials today slammed a United States health advisory warning its staff here not to drink the island's tap water. The alert issued yesterday claimed that recent tests carried out at the residences of several embassy staff showed elevated levels of bacteria in the tap water. But Foreign Affairs and Foreign Trade Minister Maxine McLean told journalists today that the American laboratory tests did not show salmonella, coliform, and E. coli, which could draw attention. McLean also said that following discussions today with the U.S. Ambassador Linda Tagliaferro and her officials that the properties where the tests were conducted were not linked to the South Coast sewage plant either. Now, the Barbados officials also questioned the results of the American tests, saying that Barbados is constantly analyzing its drinking water at source and it has been declared safe by the World Health Organization. Acting Chief Medical Officer Dr. Anton Best says the U.S. tests leave much to be desired.
The samples taken at 4 out of 5 places were negative for 3 sets of bacteria which are of public health concern, and that is Salmonella, E. coli, and coliforms. The test result that was of concern was a total bacterial count, something that is very non-specific. And from our perspective, it wasn't a very analytical test because when you get a result like that, there are a lot more tests that have to be done to determine the source and to determine the significance of finding bacteria in water.
Meanwhile, Minister McLean said Barbados will be conducting its own tests at the properties as a matter of urgency.
I took the opportunity to ask the United States of America representatives to permit the collection of water samples on the properties that were tested. And in the case of future tests, we have asked that there be simultaneous collection of samples. To these requests, the Embassy has agreed to a collaborative process with the Ministry of Health and the Barbados Water Authority. We are assured, ladies and gentlemen, by the relevant competent authorities that the drinking water supply in Barbados remains safe.
In other news now, a warning that there's gross underreporting of child abuse in Barbados. UNICEF's children's champion Faith Marshall-Harris says Barbadians need to change their mindset when it comes to how they treat the issue of child abuse. For the 2015-2016 reporting period, the Child Care Board received reports of 1,446 cases of abuse. The attorney at law, who has been calling for and helping to develop legislation to make it mandatory for child abuse to be reported, said despite efforts, the law was still in its draft stages. She was speaking to reporters on the sidelines of a child abuse symposium at the Queen Elizabeth Hospital under the theme Confronting Child Abuse, Recognition, Reporting and Responsibility.
The law itself will work once we are also very vigilant. Also, if we want to ensure that we actually report, and it can only work if it's enforced. So, in a sense, I can talk about legislation, but we really need the society to not tolerate child abuse. One of the things that I noticed, for example, it's so much ingrained in our culture, and you can dispute me on this interpretation, but I was listening to a folk song recently. Brother Neddy got locked up and he ain't doing nothing. Pam-palam. Then it goes on, he get 5 years for your own granddaughter. Pam-palam. And it struck me, you know something? That sounds like sex abuse to me, but the point is that he didn't do nothing because it was his own granddaughter. And sadly, although that's a folk song, that's reflected in the fact that we know of a number of cases in Barbados of intergenerational sex abuse where, it starts out with the father, the grandfather, the uncles. That's happening right here. And it's not reported for a number of reasons, obviously.
Marshall-Harris also addressed the issue of corporal punishment. She said she was worried about the frequent use of corporal punishment, but she refused to be drawn into a discussion on whether the country should ban it or not. Marshal Harris, however, said it was necessary for authorities to define when corporal punishment becomes abuse.
I'm worried about how much it is used and whether it slides into abuse. Too many women in particular, mothers, beat children, particularly boys, when they've got a problem with the father of the children. Is that appropriate? I know of one mother right now who is beating a little boy who's a slow learner because he won't learn at school, and she keeps the belt in the fridge. Is that just corporal punishment as discipline, or is that child abuse? We have to have our conversation. We've had conversations, but it always gets very emotional and very fraught, unfortunately. But we have to soberly consider how much license is given to parents in terms of physical abuse.
A high surf advisory and a small craft warning will be in effect for Barbados from 6 p.m. tomorrow until 6 p.m. on Wednesday, January the 31st. The Barbados Meteorological Services said a high-pressure system moving across the northwestern Atlantic will generate surface winds between 37 to 47 miles per hour and large northeasterly swells peaking between 10 to 13 feet, which are forecast to begin affecting the Eastern Caribbean late on Saturday. The Met Office warns that large waves and dangerous rip currents will create unsafe conditions for small craft operators, and these conditions may become even more adverse at high tide. Sea bathers are advised to stay out of the water.
There's regional and international news after this short break.
Barbados Today, news you can trust.
Welcome back with news from the region now. The Trinidad and Tobago Prime Minister has penned a letter to President Anthony Carmona taking strong objection to the President appointing a new chairman of the Elections and Boundaries Commission mere weeks before he demits office. Dr. Keith Rowley has urged the President to leave that responsibility to the incoming President, President-elect Paula May Weeks. Sherwin Hamilton of TV6 News has that story.
The Prime Minister told the President that as far as he knows, there is no immediate issue with the quorum of the EBC as per Section 712 of the Constitution, and suggested to the President that the incumbent chairman be left in the post, since doing so will go a long way in ensuring a continuation of peace, stability, and a good order in the country.
And on the international scene, President Donald Trump tells global finance leaders he will always put the U.S. first when it comes to trade. In his inaugural address to the World Economic Forum in Davos, he said the U.S. is open for business, but he continued to attack what he called predatory trade practices, warning partners that the U.S. will not tolerate unfair trade.
We cannot have free and open trade if some countries exploit the system at the expense of others. The United States will no longer turn a blind eye to unfair economic practices, including massive intellectual property theft, industrial subsidies, and pervasive state-led economic planning.
That's news, but for the very latest, visit our website at www.barbadostoday.bb. You can also subscribe to our e-paper, email updates, or like us on Facebook. We are also on Izumi Media in bus terminals, as well as screenplay at supermarkets and gas stations near you. You can also hear us on Mix 96.9 FM. I'm Emmanuel Joseph. Have a great weekend and join us again on Monday.